War is a matter of vital importance for the state. It is the province of life and death, the road which leads to survival or elimination. It is essential to study it in depth. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. As a world system, neoliberalism is a new war for the conquest of territory. The ending of the Third World War, meaning the Cold War, in no sense means that the world has gone beyond the bipolar and found stability under the domination of a single victor. Because, while there was certainly a defeat of the socialist camp, it is hard to say who won. The United States? The European Union? Japan? All three? The defeat of the, quote, evil empire, unquote, has opened up new markets, and the struggle over them is leading to a new world war, the fourth. Like all major conflicts, this war is forcing national states to redefine their identity. The world order seems to have reverted to the earlier epochs of the conquests of America, Africa, and Oceania, a strange modernity. This, which progresses by going backwards. A twilight years of the 20th century bear more of a resemblance to the previous centuries of barbarism than to the rational futures described in science fiction novels. Vast territories, wealth, and above all, a huge and available workforce lie waiting for the world's new master. But, while there is only one position as master on offer, there are many aspiring candidates, and that explains the New World War between those who see themselves as part of the empire of good. Unlike the Third World War, in which the conflict between capitalism and socialism took place over a variety of terrains and with varying degrees of intensity, the Fourth World War is being conducted between major financial centers, in theaters of war that are global in scale and with a level of intensity that is fierce and constant. The ineptly named Cold War actually reached very high temperatures, from underground workings of international espionage to the interstellar space of Ronald Reagan's famous Star Wars. From the sands of the Bay of Pigs in Cuba to the Mekong Delta in Vietnam, from the frenzy of the nuclear arms race to the vicious coups d'etats in Latin America, from the menacing maneuvers of NATO armies to the machinations of the CIA agents in Bolivia, where Che Guevara was murdered. The combination of all this led to the socialist camp being undermined as a world system, and to its dissolution as a social alternative. The Third World War showed the benefits of total war for its victor, which was capitalism. In the post-Cold War period, we see the emergence of a new planetary scenario, in which the principal conflictual elements are the growing importance of no man's lands, arising out of the collapse of the Eastern Bloc countries, the expansion of a number of major powers, the United States, the European Union, and Japan, a world economic crisis, and a new technical revolution based on information technology. Thanks to computers and the technological revolution, the financial markets, operating from their offices and answerable to nobody but themselves, have been imposing their laws and worldview on the planet as a whole. Globalization is merely the totalitarian extension of the logic of the finance markets to all aspects of life. Where they were once in command of their economies, the nation-states and their governments are commanded, or rather telecommanded, by the same basic logic of financial power, commercial free trade, and, in addition, This logic has profited from a new permeability created by the development of telecommunications to appropriate all aspects of social activity. At last, a world war which is totally total. One of its first victims has been the national market. Rather like a bullet fired inside a concrete room, the war unleashed by neoliberalism ricochets and ends by wounding the person who fired it. One of the fundamental bases of the power of the modern capitalist state, the national market, is wiped out by the heavy artillery of the global finance economy. The new international capitalism renders national capitalism obsolete and effectively starves their public powers into extinction. The blow has been so brutal that sovereign states have lost the strength to defend their citizens' interests. The fine showcase inherited from the ending of the Cold War, the New World Order, has shattered into fragments as a result of the neoliberal explosion. It has no more than a few minutes for companies and states to be sunk, but they are sunk not by winds of proletarian revolution, but by the violence of the hurricanes of world finance. The sun, neoliberalism, is devouring the father, national capital, and, in the process, is destroying the lies of capitalist ideology. In the New World Order, there is neither democracy nor freedom, neither equality nor fraternity. The planetary stage is transformed into a new battlefield in which chaos reigns. Towards the end of the Cold War, capitalism created a new military horror, the neutron bomb, a weapon which destroys life while sparing buildings. But a new wonder has been discovered as the Fourth World War unfolds, the finance bomb. Unlike the bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, this new bomb does not simply destroy the polis, in this case the nation, and bring death, terror, and misery to those who live there. It also transforms its target into a piece in the jigsaw puzzle of the process of economic globalization. The result of the explosion is not a pile of smoking ruins or thousands of dead bodies, but a neighborhood added to one of the commercial megalopolis of the new planetary hypermarket, and a labor force which is reshaped to fit in with the new planetary job market. The European Union is a result of this Fourth World War. In Europe, globalization has succeeded in eliminating the frontiers between rival states that had been enemies for centuries, and has forced them to converge towards political union. On the way from the nation-state to the European Federation, the road will be paved with destruction and ruin. One of these ruins will be that of European civilization. Megalopolises are reproducing themselves right across the planet. Their favorite spawning ground is in the world's free trade areas. In North America, the North American Free Trade Agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico is a prelude to the accomplishment of an old dream of U.S. conquest, America for the Americans. Are megalopolises replacing nations? No, or rather not merely that. They are assigning them new functions, new limits, and new perspectives. Entire countries are becoming departments of the neoliberal mega-enterprise. Neoliberalism thus produces, on the one hand, destruction and depopulation, and on the other, the reconstruction and reorganization of regions and nations. Unlike nuclear bombs, which had a dissuasive, intimidating, and coercive character in the Third World War, the financial hyperbombs of the Fourth World War are different in nature. They serve to attack territories, national states, by the destruction of the material bases of their sovereignty, and by producing a qualitative depopulation of those territories. This depopulation involves the exclusion of all persons who are of no use to the new economy, indigenous peoples, for instance. But at the same time, the financial centers are working on a reconstruction of nation-states and are reorganizing them within a new logic. The economic has the upper hand over the social. The indigenous world is full of examples, illustrating this strategy. Ian Chambers, director of the Central America section of the International Labor Organization, has stated that the worldwide populations of indigenous peoples, 300 million people, lives in zones which house 60% of the planet's natural resources. It is therefore not surprising that there are multiple conflicts over the use and future of their lands in relation to the interests of business and governments. The exploitation of natural resources, oil and minerals, and tourism are the principal industries threatening indigenous territories in America. And then come pollution, prostitution, and drugs. In this new war, politics, as the organizer of the nation-state, no longer exists. Now politics serves solely in order to manage the economy, and politicians are now merely company managers. The world's new masters have no need to govern directly. National governments take on the role of running things on their behalf. This is what the New Order means: unification of the world into one single market. States are simply enterprises with managers in the guise of governments, and the new regional alliances bear more a resemblance to shopping malls than political federations. The unification produced by neoliberalism is economic. In the giant planetary hypermarket, it is only commodities that circulate freely, not people. This economic globalization is also accompanied by a general way of thinking. The American way of life, which followed American troops into Europe during the Second World War, then to Vietnam in the 1960s, and more recently into the Gulf War, is now extending itself to the planet as a whole, via computers. What we have here is a destruction of the material bases of nation-states, but we also have a destruction of history and culture. All the cultures which nations have forged, the noble past of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, the brilliance of European civilization, the cultured history of the Asian nations, and the ancestral wealth of Africa and Oceania. All these are under attack from the American way of life. Neoliberalism thus imposes the destruction of nations and of groups of nations in order to fuse them into one single model. The war which neoliberalism is conducting against humanity is thus a planetary war, and is the worst and most cruel ever seen. What we have here is a puzzle. When we attempt to put its pieces together, in order to arrive at an understanding of today's world, we find that a lot of the pieces are missing. Still, we can make a start with 7 of them, in the hope that this conflict will not end with the destruction of humanity. 7 pieces to draw, color in, cut out, and put together with others, in order to try to solve this global puzzle. The first of these pieces is the twofold accumulation of wealth and poverty at the 2 poles of planetary society. The second is the total exploitation of the totality of the world. The third is the nightmare of that part of humanity condemned to a life of wandering. The fourth is the sickening relationship between crime and state power. The fifth is state violence. The sixth is the mystery of megapolitics. The seventh is the multiple forms of resistance which humanity is deploying against neoliberalism.